But so, we talked in the last video about all of the Nintendo Switch 2 leaks and all of the ways that it seems that the Nintendo Switch 2 is right around the corner, right? A lot of those leaks, a lot of that sort of inside information that we have at this point has come from an accessories manufacturer named Genki. Genki, you'll remember, was on the floor of CES with a 3D printed Nintendo Switch 2 prototype, right? That's what they're calling it. And so it was allegedly what the actual Nintendo Switch 2 is going to look like, 3D printed and available for people to handle and sort of get a feel for how the buttons were and what buttons there were and what ports there were, right? And that was crazy. But then Genki disappeared from the floor of CES. And there was some speculation as to why would that happen? Could it have been that it was Nintendo's doing? And so we have more information on that. CNET Japan came out with an article today, or yesterday rather, January 10th, around 11:30. So right before we went to bed here, that Nintendo may have in fact intervened. And so the article says, Genki said Switch's successor will be launched in April, and the new Joy-Con controller will have multiple new features. Genki is said to have the mock-up based on the Switch 2 console they obtained. This is translated from Japanese, so I'm trying to translate the translation into actual English sentences as I go here. And so Nintendo then came out with a statement about this, right? And what they said to CNET Japan was, and the way that this article says it, is Nintendo showed a position to stay away from Genki's actions in response to requests for comment. So we can Google translate that into saying that, they distanced themselves from Genki's actions. It says the company commented to the US CNET that, quote, the gaming hardware that Genki claims to be Nintendo hardware at CES is informal, which the translation there is unofficial, and not what Nintendo provided to the company. So what Nintendo has said here is that that is unofficial and that Nintendo did not provide that to the company, right? Genki has in the past said that they did not get their hands on a Switch 2 prototype through Nintendo, but through the black market. They got it some way they weren't supposed to, but they got their hands on one. And that as a result, they were able to build their accessories, right? And you figure if you're an accessories manufacturer and you don't have prototypes, but you want to be in on the game when the Switch 2 comes out, you're probably going to go to that length, right? You're probably going to find, especially with something that's going to be as high volume, as high throughput as a Switch 2, you're going to find a way to get your hands on the hardware. What Nintendo has said, and all that Nintendo has said here, is that the stuff that Genki has is not official and that Nintendo didn't provide it. And so sort of leaves some question marks, right? Because when it comes to corporate speak, when it comes to public relations, what they don't say is almost as important as what they do say, right? And so an out-and-out denial, right, of that is not Switch hardware, that is not Nintendo hardware. We don't know what's going on with that. We have nothing to do with that, is a statement they could have made. But what they said was that what Genki had on the floor was unofficial and not provided to them by Nintendo. And both of those things can be true, and that can be the Switch 2 model, right? That can be what the console looks like, and Nintendo's statement can be true. And I suspect that that's the case. Now, you might think, well, that's maybe reading too into it, right? It seems entirely possible that that's them just ineloquently saying that that's not the Switch 2, which, I mean, it might not be. But then why? Why did Nintendo lawyers reportedly confront Genki over the Switch 2 mock-up at CES 2025? And so this is something that we had suspected from the beginning, which was that Genki's disappearance from the show floor at CES had something to do with Nintendo. And so that's now being confirmed for us, at least in some way, by a lot of different reporting, but I guess it all comes from a French journalist. And so let's get into that here. So it says Genki's 2025 showcase of a Switch 2 mock-up led to a reported legal confrontation with Nintendo. The chatter around Nintendo Switch 2 is higher than ever, despite Nintendo's strict silence about the highly anticipated console. Rumors have been popping up for months, with leaks hinting at everything from upgraded hardware to new features like magnetic Joy-Cons. Fans have pieced together information from alleged developers and sources and patent filings, all while Nintendo maintains a tight lid on official details. With expected announcement this month, the hype is reaching a new high, and every scrap of potential information feels monumental. At CES 2025, accessory manufacturer Genki showcased a physical mock-up of the Nintendo Switch 2. Known for producing peripherals for gaming devices like the original Switch and PlayStation 5, the company sparked significant attention with its display and a detailed video render of the next-gen console. However, things took a surprising turn when reports surfaced that Nintendo's lawyers had confronted Genki over its claims. And so this French journalist, Julien Telluc, who attended CES, revealed the story in a YouTube short. According to him, he said a Genki representative claimed that Nintendo had already sent lawyers to their booth. And despite this, Genki reportedly defended its position, saying that it had no formal relationship with Nintendo, and they said that they'd never signed any agreements or NDAs and were not bound by confidentiality restrictions. And so the interesting thing here is they're sort of doubling down on the fact that we did not get this console from Nintendo. This came off of the black market. This came off of, my uncle who works at Nintendo, wherever it might have come from. They made molds based on that questionably obtained Nintendo Switch 2. And that because they never entered into a contractual agreement with Nintendo about, the use of it or the privacy of it, right? They're good to do whatever they want, which makes sense, right? Because if they genuinely happened upon a Nintendo Switch 2 and all they've done is make accessories for the thing, I guess in theory, they can do whatever they want, right? They could go and take pictures of the thing and, they're under no obligation. And so really interesting that Nintendo would send the lawyers. And I think that that's really a confirmation of the information, right? Nintendo's never going to come out and say, you got us, right? But you're not going to send your lawyers to try to shake down somebody who's not showing Nintendo hardware or who's not leaking information you don't want them to leak, right? I think if it's like a 5,000 IQ move, you might, just so that way it creates the appearance of that. But I think that's on another level. That's not where we're at with this, right? I think what this is them showing up and saying, hey, what the hell are you doing? You can't be doing this. And then Genki saying, oh no, but we can. And I think that that's, confirmation in and of itself, because you can't attempt to enforce intellectual property rights on something that you do not have the intellectual property rights for, And so I think that this happening, if it did happen, which, I think all of this you take with a grain of salt, because this is the report of a French journalist who had spoken to someone from Genki, right? This isn't necessarily, a video of that happening. This is a sort of secondhand retelling, but is, nonetheless, we have no reason not to find this credible. I mean, it's telling, right? And so my gut says that regardless of when we get an announcement, that the Genki leaks are probably good as gold at this point. Not because Genki is necessarily like this super reliable, well-established person, but just because they seem to be attracting the right kind of attention, right? If you're looking for an indication that they're on the right track, right? Having Nintendo lawyers show up at their booth and say, hey, you can't do that, I think is a strong suggestion that that's probably the right thing, right? And so the whole thing is incredibly fascinating. I'm excited to see what happens. I mean, I really do feel like it could be any day now. I know that there's a lot of talk that it could be sometime next week that we see an announcement, or at least like hey, heads up, we're having a Nintendo Direct on this day. And I think that's going to be crazy, right? When that happens, that will be a crazy exciting news cycle for anybody who's into video games, especially people who are into Nintendo like me and like many of you who are just kind of hanging out. But we'll see. We're getting there. It's happening, folks. We had GTA 6 announced, and we'll also have Nintendo Switch 2 announced. And hopefully, it'll be as good as we hope it will be. And, they've got a lot of hype to live up to. But I think at this point, we're running the risk of starting to get people a little irritated if they're not already, if we continue to delay, right? If the announcement doesn't come until, March or April, then, that could get difficult for folks. But I don't know. Maybe it's this month, or maybe we'll be watching this video in like 2 months and laughing, and we'll be like, yo, suborbital, this guy. But anyway, so that's the news on that. That's the latest update. It seems to me like Genki's on to something. It seems to me like they've got it figured out. And so let me know what you think. I'm curious to hear. For the YouTube people, leave a comment, subscribe, etc., etc. For the Twitch people, let's keep talking.